Chapter 6 Side Story 1 Kyungmi. This is something that happened shortly after I returned home from my surgery, during the period when I was climbing the mountain every day to rehabilitate my leg. On the ground floor of my parents' building, there was a Chinese restaurant. The owner had been there for years and had watched me grow up, seeing me nearly every day since I graduated from high school. One day, a girl about my age suddenly appeared at my door. She was a complete stranger, so I asked how she had found me. She introduced herself as Kyungmi. She was slightly younger than I was and a student at Busan National University, the very school whose pharmacy department had rejected me because of my disability. She was majoring in art, specifically drawing. From my perspective, her life seemed much better than mine. Yet she was deeply depressed, even despairing. The reason was familiar. She limped. Like me, she was a survivor of polio. It turned out she went into the Chinese restaurant downstairs that day to have her lunch. Seeing she was extremely depressed, almost suicidal, in fact, and she was also limping on her leg. The owner of the restaurant thought she could use some help from me. The restaurant had been in our building for years, and therefore the owner had seen me for all those years ever since I graduated from high school. He had no idea what happened to me exactly, but he had seen how much I changed throughout those years, from being suicidal to becoming an extremely positive person. So he carefully recommended her to go upstairs and see me, saying the landlord's eldest daughter shared her disability, and yet she, which was I, was living in extreme happiness and contentment from one day. That was why Kyungmi was standing in my doorway. At that time, I was overflowing with confidence and the joy of God, especially after the miracle of my surgery. Recognizing a perfect opportunity to lead her to the same peace I had found, I shared the gospel and my testimony with her for hours. She listened with an intensity I'll never forget. I was the living proof of everything I was saying. She desperately wanted what I had, but there was a hurdle. But the thing is, I just don't want to go to church, she confessed, her voice thick with emotion. I can't stand the way people look at me. I feel like a monkey in a zoo when they watch me limp. I can't take those eyes. I understood her perfectly. I had been that same girl, avoiding main roads just to escape the gaze of strangers. I knew it would be too much for her to go to church when hundreds of people were gathered, and both now and then, I was never bound by so called traditions or fixed ideas of a society or an organization. I offered a simple solution. Then go to the church when it's empty, I said. You don't need an audience to pray. Avoid Sundays and Wednesday nights when they hold services. Go on any other day and just talk to God. I know He will meet you there. I knew she could pray anywhere, in fact, but at that time, I also believed it might be better if one prayed in the church rather than in his or her home. She liked the idea. We prayed together, and after she accepted Christ, she left. I didn't see her again for 2 weeks. Then, after 2 weeks, suddenly Gyungmi reappeared. She was unrecognizable. Her face was as bright as the morning sun. I knew what happened even before she announced it as she dashed in. Sister, I received the Holy Spirit just like you said. We were both so overcome with joy that we would have danced if our legs had allowed it. She had followed my advice. She went to the church on quiet weekdays and prayed for the Holy Spirit with all her heart. Then, one day, she received the Holy Spirit. Bursting into tears, she found herself praising God both in Korean and in tongues. Yes, she was given the gift of tongues at the same time when she received the Holy Spirit. Not just the gift of tongues, more exactly, but even the gift of interpretation. She could both speak in tongues and understand what she or another person was saying in tongues. It didn't end there. She said the tongues she was given were in fact some form of ancient language. The reason she knew this was because there was a subject in her major that required the study of an ancient language. It was a subject related to the history of art, and the knowledge of the ancient language was required to understand the history of art, she said. It was one of the subjects she had been struggling with most, no need to say. Yet she could understand all the questions in her test in this subject suddenly after she was given the gifts of tongues and interpretation of tongues. I was almost dumbfounded, since it was a new world even to me. But the most beautiful grace was the change in her physical body. Kyungmi's condition had actually been more severe than mine. While I had some nerve function left before my surgery, her leg had been completely unresponsive. To walk, she had to manually push her thigh with her hand to keep the leg straight with every single step. She used three fingers to do this so constantly that she had permanent bruises on her leg. The medical team that operated on me had told her there was nothing they could do because there was no living tendons to work with. That was why, in fact, she was that much depressed when she first came to me. Yet, after she received the Holy Spirit, her leg improved. Somehow, life returned to those dormant muscles. She no longer had to use her hand to walk. It was a miracle. From then on, she came to see me almost every day. Her family lived in the countryside, so she was all alone in the city for her studies. We became each other's support, sharing meals and testifying to the grace in our lives. Those were priceless days. Unfortunately, our time together was cut short. My family, my grandmother in particular, began to resent her daily visits. They viewed her frequent presence and the meal she shared with us as shameless. The pressure from my family became so unbearable that I eventually had to ask her to stop coming for a while. She simply nodded and left. That was the last time we saw each other, and we lost contact shortly after. I do not know how she has become since then. I, however, do know one thing for sure. She met God for sure, and she was in good hands, in God's hands. I know God would lead her wherever she goes. I just look forward to the day we meet again, whether it be in this world or in the Father's kingdom.